After months of absolute silence, no updates, no interactions, no subtle hints or clues, the industry had quietly accepted one thing. Rowoon and Park Eun-bin were officially walking on separate paths again. Their careers were growing, but their connection, once so warm and so full of invisible threads, seemed to have disappeared into the cold distance. Fans had been waiting, patiently, almost painfully, believing that one day something would break the silence. But no one expected it to happen like this, so suddenly, so emotionally, and so publicly. It all began at a major awards night in Seoul. Both were scheduled to attend, but fans assumed their teams would keep distance between them, just like before. Rowoon arrived first, looking calm, composed, but with a quiet heaviness in his expression that fans instantly noticed. Then, minutes later, Park Eun-bin stepped onto the carpet. She looked stunning, but more than that, there was something different, something softer in her eyes, something almost trembling beneath her smile. It was the first time they had appeared in the same place after months of carefully managed silence. Cameras were ready, fans were recording, but no one could have predicted what happened next. Inside the venue, as Rowoon walked toward his seat, he paused for a moment when he realized Park Eun-bin was already nearby. Their eyes met, just once, but long enough for fans watching the live stream to freeze completely. That single glance felt like an entire conversation pouring out all at once. Months of unsaid things, unanswered questions, and unresolved emotions seemed to hover between them like a breath that refused to release. Park Eun-bin looked away first, but not out of avoidance, more like she was overwhelmed and needed a second to gather herself. Rowoon's expression softened in a way fans had not seen in a long time. He took a small step closer, hesitated, then finally approached. When he bowed to her, cameras flashed nonstop, but what shocked everyone wasn't the bow. It was the expression on Eun-bin's face. Her eyes glistened, not with sadness, but with something more complicated, something like relief. As Rowoon straightened, their eyes met again. This time, Eun-bin smiled. A small, genuine smile, one she didn't force for the cameras, one she didn't hide behind professionalism. It was the kind of smile you give someone you've missed more than you're brave enough to admit. Fans exploded online instantly. Then came the moment no one expected. During a tribute segment, the camera panned to the audience. Rowoon and Park Eun-bin were seated 3 rows apart. When the performer began to sing an emotional OST song, ironically from the very drama that once tied their names together, Eun-bin lowered her head, visibly holding back tears. The lyrics, the lighting, the timing, it was too much. What stunned the world was Rowoon. He turned his head, watching her with quiet concern, his expression softening with every second. He didn't move toward her, but it was clear he wanted to. He clenched his jaw lightly, the way he always did when he was trying to control his emotions. It was a raw moment, unfiltered, unguarded, and completely unplanned. When the song ended, Eun-bin wiped a tear discreetly, thinking no one saw. But Rowoon did. Later, backstage, where cameras were limited but not entirely absent, Rowoon finally approached her directly. They stood together in a quiet hallway illuminated by soft stage lights. It was the first time in months they spoke privately, but even then, it didn't feel private enough. Witnesses said the moment was brief but powerful. Rowoon said something softly, something that made Eun-bin exhale shakily, as if releasing everything she'd been carrying. She nodded, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, her expression warm but emotional. Rowoon gently placed his hand on his chest, a gesture of sincerity, before bowing once again. No one heard the words they exchanged, but their expressions told the entire story. For the first time in months, they weren't avoiding each other. They weren't acting. They weren't pretending. They were simply 2 people who once meant something to each other, finally standing in the same moment again. As they walked out of the venue, the silence that once separated them didn't feel cold anymore. Instead, it felt like something was shifting, healing, reconnecting, rebuilding itself one quiet moment at a time. And fans, they cried, they screamed, they stayed up all night replaying the footage. Because this wasn't just a reunion. This was a beginning. The night of their reunion ended quietly, but the world did not sleep. Clips of Rowoon's concerned glance, Eun-bin's trembling smile, and their unexpected backstage exchange dominated every platform. Fans replayed the videos endlessly, analyzing every frame, every breath, every look. Nothing about that reunion felt planned. It felt real. It felt like two people finding their way back to familiarity after drifting far apart. But what the public saw was only the beginning. In the days following the awards, both Rowoon and Eun-bin disappeared again, not out of avoidance, but out of necessity. Their reunion had sparked a storm, and neither wanted to add unnecessary fuel to the fire. However, silence no longer meant distance. Something had shifted between them that night, something neither could ignore. It was Eun-bin who made the next unexpected move. 3 days after the awards, she arrived quietly at a private script-reading studio in Gangnam. She had been reviewing potential projects and meeting directors, blending into her normal routine. But when she stepped into one of the rehearsal rooms to retrieve a misplaced notebook, she froze. Rowoon was there, alone, reviewing lines for an upcoming project. He looked up the moment she walked in. For a second, both simply stared, surprised, unprepared, unsure whether to speak or step back out and pretend the moment never happened. But this wasn't the red carpet. This wasn't surrounded by cameras. There was no audience, no pressure, no carefully drawn boundaries. Eun-bin stepped inside and closed the door softly. Rowoon put down his script. "What are you working on?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. He hesitated, then smiled in a way she hadn't seen since their early filming days. "Something new," he said, but it felt familiar. "It reminded me of us." The words hung between them, heavier than either expected. Eun-bin sat across from him, not too close, not too far, just enough for her to feel present. She watched him for a moment, noticing the way he fidgeted with the edge of the script, something he only did when he was nervous around people he cared about. "About the other night," she finally said. "I didn't expect to feel so much." Rowoon nodded slowly. "Neither did I." Silence lingered again, but this time it felt warm rather than awkward. It was a silence filled with unspoken apologies, old memories, and the complicated tenderness of two people who once shared a deep bond. "There was a lot I wanted to say," Rowoon continued, "but it wasn't the right place, and I didn't want to pressure you." "You didn't," she replied softly. "It actually helped." Her voice wavered, not from uncertainty but from honesty. Then, hesitating only briefly, Rowoon asked, "Can we talk? Not as colleagues, not as actors, just as us." Eun-bin took a quiet breath, then nodded. "Yes, we should." And so, for the first time in months, they talked not about work, not about schedules, but about everything that happened in the silent space between them. How the pressures of the industry had pulled them in different directions. How fear of public misunderstanding kept them distant. How losing the natural comfort they once shared had affected them more deeply than either dared admit. Eun-bin confessed that she had felt overwhelmed by the constant speculation, worried that any small gesture toward him would be misinterpreted. Rowoon admitted he had withdrawn not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much and didn't want to make her uncomfortable. Their honesty was quiet but disarming. By the time they left the room, the conversation had softened something in both of their hearts. The tension was gone. In its place was a renewed, delicate warmth. Not a relationship, not a confession, just something real forming again, piece by piece. The world didn't know it yet, but their story had quietly restarted. Later that evening, Rowoon texted her for the first time in months. It wasn't dramatic or emotional, just simple. "Did you get home safely?" Eun-bin read the message twice, her chest tightening in a way she had almost forgotten. She typed back, "Yes, thank you for today." Before she could lock her phone, another message came. "Can we meet again? If you feel comfortable." She stared at the words, feeling both surprised and strangely relieved. After a long moment, she typed, "Yes, we should." It was the smallest step, but it was the one fans had been hoping for all along. Not a love story, not yet, but a reconnection, quiet, genuine, and powerful enough to change everything. And for the first time in months, both Rowoon and Park Eun-bin went to sleep with a lighter heart. Their silence had finally been broken. Their distance had quietly closed. Their beginning had found its way back.